Cecilia Wentworth had perfected the art of invisibility. She stood near the stone pillar of St. George's Church, close enough to witness her youngest sister's wedding, but far enough to remind everyone, including herself, that she did not truly belong in this picture. The pews overflowed with silk and lace, with feathered hats and whispered gossip, with the cream of London society gathered to watch Arabella Wentworth marry a viscount, the fourth Wentworth daughter to marry, the fourth to escape. Cecilia smoothed her grey-blue dress, a colour chosen specifically to blend with shadows, and watched her mother dab at theatrical tears in the front row. Lady Wentworth had worn black to Cecilia's coming-out ball 12 years ago, claiming a headache. She wore rose silk today. Stunning ceremony, a woman murmured behind her. All 4 daughters married before 23. Lady Wentworth must be beside herself with joy. 3 daughters, her companion corrected. There are 4, but the eldest, well, you know. Cecilia didn't turn around. She knew. The eldest, 27, unmarried. The family's quiet shame dressed in serviceable wool while her sisters glittered like diamonds. She had stopped counting the pitying glances years ago. They hurt less when you didn't count them. The ceremony ended in a shower of rose petals and applause. Cecilia slipped out before anyone could notice her leaving, or worse, not notice at all, and made her way to the reception at Ashworth House. Her duty today was simple: ensure the champagne kept flowing, the musicians stayed on tempo, and her mother's migraine remained at bay. She had organized every detail of this wedding, as she had organized the 3 before it. No one had thanked her. No one would. The ballroom blazed with candlelight. Cecilia found her usual position near the windows, half hidden by heavy velvet drapes, and watched her sisters dance. Arabella spun in her husband's arms, laughing. Rosalind whispered to her Marquis. Beatrice adjusted the diamonds at her throat, a wedding gift from her Earl. 3 perfect matches, 3 perfect escapes. And Cecilia, keeper of household accounts, nurse to their ailing mother, organizer of everyone else's happiness, the spinster, the leftover. She was reaching for a glass of champagne, her first and only indulgence of the evening, when she felt it. A weight, a presence, the unmistakable sensation of being watched. Cecilia turned. He stood across the ballroom like a slash of midnight against the golden light, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed entirely in black as though he had wandered in from a funeral or a Gothic novel. His hair was dark, swept back from a face that seemed carved from marble, beautiful in the way that storms are beautiful, the way cliffs are beautiful before you fall from them. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath, dark as ink, fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. She looked away first. Of course she did. Men like that didn't look at women like her, and when they did, it was usually to locate someone else. Cecilia, her mother's sharp voice cut through the music. Stop lurking and make yourself useful. The Duchess needs more ice for her punch. Cecilia set down her untouched champagne. Yes, mother. She didn't look back at the man in black. There was no point. The next hour passed in a blur of small tasks and smaller humiliations. She fetched ice. She calmed a weeping bridesmaid. She listened to her aunt lecture her about the importance of accepting one's station in life with grace. Through it all, she felt those dark eyes following her across the room. Impossible. Ridiculous. She was imagining it. She escaped to the terrace for air, pressing her palms against the cold stone balustrade. The night was cool, the stars hidden behind London's eternal haze of coal smoke. She breathed. Once. Twice. Tried to remember why she stayed, why she endured. Because there was nowhere else to go, because women without husbands and without fortunes had no choices, because she had learned long ago that survival meant smallness, meant silence, meant swallowing every dream until you forgot you ever had them. You're not drinking, the voice came from behind her, low, dark, smooth as velvet over steel. Cecilia spun. The man in black stood 3 feet away, a glass of champagne in each hand. Up close, he was even more unsettling. The angles of his face were too sharp, his presence too consuming. He looked at her the way scientists looked at specimens, the way collectors looked at rare objects. I beg your pardon? Her voice came out steadier than she felt. The champagne. I've been watching you for an hour. You haven't had a single sip. You've been watching me. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. Yes, he offered her one of the glasses. Does that disturb you? Should it? The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. Most women would find it flattering. Most women aren't accustomed to being watched. Cecilia didn't take the glass. They're accustomed to being seen. There's a difference. Something flickered in his dark eyes. Interest, recognition. And you? Which are you accustomed to? Neither. This time, he did smile. It transformed his face, made him somehow more dangerous rather than less. Sebastian Ashford, he said, Duke of Blackmore. Cecilia's heart stuttered. Blackmore. She had heard the name whispered in scandal sheets and drawing rooms for years. The reclusive Duke, the widower, the man whose first wife had died under mysterious circumstances, whose fortune was as vast as his reputation was dark. Half the mothers in London dreamed of matching their daughters to his title. The other half warned their daughters to stay far, far away. Miss Wentworth, she said, but I suspect you already know that. I do. He was still holding out the champagne. I know quite a lot about you, actually. That's unsettling. You're 27, unmarried. You've managed your family's household for the past 8 years, while your mother claims credit for your work. You speak 3 languages, play piano poorly but paint beautifully, and you haven't danced at a single ball in 5 seasons because no one asks you. Each fact landed like a blow. Cecilia felt her cheeks burn. Have you been spying on me? Researching. He said it as though the distinction mattered. I needed to be certain. Certain of what? The Duke of Blackmore set both glasses on the balustrade. Then, slowly, deliberately, he sank to one knee. Cecilia stopped breathing. Marry me, he said. The words hung in the air between them. Impossible, absurd, terrifying. Below them, in the ballroom, she could hear the orchestra playing a waltz. Her sister laughing. The clink of crystal. She couldn't form a sentence. You can't. We've just met. I don't require a lengthy acquaintance. I require a wife. Then find one among the hundreds of women who would actually want to marry you. I don't want someone who wants to marry me. His gaze never wavered. I want someone who has no illusions about me, no romantic expectations, no dreams of love. Cecilia stared at him. This couldn't be happening. This was madness. Beautiful, terrifying madness. And she needed to wake up. Why me? She whispered. Because you're invisible, he said. And the word that had defined her pain became in his mouth something almost like praise. Because you've survived being overlooked your entire life, which means you're stronger than anyone in that ballroom. Because I need a wife who won't love me, and you, Miss Wentworth, have every reason not to. She should refuse. She should slap him. She should march back into that ballroom and pretend this fever dream had never happened. But his eyes. God help her, his eyes. What do I get? She heard herself ask. If I agree to this arrangement? Freedom. The word resonated like a struck bell. Your own fortune. A title that will make everyone who ever pitied you choke on their champagne. And my word, my absolute word that I will never touch you without your permission. Never touch her. A marriage without love, without intimacy, without any of the things she had once dreamed of. A transaction, a contract, a way out. Yes, Cecilia said. The Duke rose to his feet. For a moment something almost like surprise crossed his face, as though he hadn't quite believed she would agree. Tomorrow, he said, my solicitor will call on your father. Then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows as suddenly as he had appeared, leaving Cecilia alone on the terrace with 2 untouched glasses of champagne and the dawning realization that she had just sold herself to the most dangerous man in England. The chaos began before breakfast. Cecilia woke to her mother's screams, theatrical, piercing, designed to summon the entire household, and the sound of her father's study door slamming. By the time she reached the morning room, all 3 of her married sisters had materialized with their husbands in tow, and Lady Wentworth was clutching a letter as though it contained a death threat. He's mad, her mother wailed. The man is certifiably insane. Why would anyone? Perhaps, her father said grimly, we should ask Cecilia. Every eye in the room turned to her. Her sisters, her brothers-in-law, her mother, whose expression hovered between horror and a calculation Cecilia recognized too well. The Duke of Blackmore, her father continued, has requested your hand in marriage. His solicitor arrived at dawn with a settlement offer that is, frankly, obscene. He wants the wedding within the fortnight. Rosalind gasped. Beatrice clutched her pearls. Arabella, married less than 24 hours, looked as though she might faint. Cecilia, her mother's voice had shifted, sharper now, probing. What did you do? I stood on a terrace and said yes to a stranger. I chose escape over safety. I made a decision for once in my life that had nothing to do with any of you. He proposed, Cecilia said simply. I accepted. The silence that followed was almost worth the years of invisibility. Her mother recovered first. "But he's— Cecilia, the man's wife died. There are rumors." "Rumors are not facts. You cannot possibly marry him. You've known him for a single evening. He's a duke." Cecilia let the word settle. "The wealthiest duke in England, according to father's expression. And I've accepted." Her father cleared his throat. "The settlement is extraordinary. He's offering—" "I don't care about the money." But her mother did. Cecilia could see it, the rapid calculation behind the horror, the moment when greed overtook fear. A duke. Her plain, invisible spinster daughter had somehow captured a duke. It was impossible, suspicious, almost certainly disastrous, but it was also the kind of social coup that could be dined out on for years. "Well," Lady Wentworth straightened her shoulders, "I suppose we should meet him, properly." The Duke of Blackmore arrived at 3 o'clock, announced by a footman whose voice trembled. He swept into the drawing room like a storm cloud, all dark elegance and controlled power, and Cecilia felt the room shrink around him. Her family stared. Her mother attempted a curtsy. Her father extended a hand that Sebastian ignored. "Miss Wentworth." His gaze found Cecilia immediately, as though no one else existed. "I trust you've had time to reconsider." "I have." "And?" "My answer remains the same." Something passed through his eyes, relief, satisfaction, before the mask returned. "Then I suggest we dispense with the pleasantries. I'll need a private word with your daughter," Lady Wentworth sputtered. "That's highly irregular. So is proposing to a woman I've known for 10 minutes. He didn't look away from Cecilia. "I assure you, madam, your daughter's virtue is safe with me. I have no interest in it." The words should have stung. Instead, they settled something in Cecilia's chest. This was the bargain she had made. This was the truth of it. Her father nodded, and the family filed out like chastened children, leaving Cecilia alone with the man who would become her husband. "Sit," Sebastian said. "I prefer to stand." The ghost of a smile. "You have questions." "Dozens. Why don't we start with the obvious one?" Cecilia crossed her arms. "Why me? And don't give me the speech about invisibility again. I want the truth." Sebastian moved to the window, his back to her. When he spoke, his voice was different, lower, rougher, stripped of its aristocratic polish. "I was married before. Helena. She was beautiful, accomplished, everything society expected a duchess to be. She was also fragile in ways I didn't understand until it was too late." Cecilia waited. "She died 3 years ago. The rumors say I killed her." He turned, and his face was a mask of controlled devastation. "In a way, they're right." The confession hung between them. Dark, terrible, incomplete. "How?" Cecilia asked. "I loved her. I thought love would be enough to save her. It wasn't." His jaw tightened. "I need a wife for practical reasons. An heir, a hostess, someone to manage my households. But I cannot, I will not love again. Do you understand?" Cecilia understood more than he knew. She understood wanting to protect yourself from pain. She understood building walls so high that nothing could breach them. She understood the terrible calculus of survival. "You want a business arrangement?" she said. "Yes. Separate lives, separate beds, no expectations." "Precisely." She should feel relieved. Instead, she felt something like disappointment. A small, stupid flicker of the girl she used to be. The one who had once believed in love and dancing and happy endings. She killed that girl. She had to. "Very well," Cecilia said. "I accept your terms, but I have conditions of my own." Sebastian's eyebrow rose. "Name them." "I want my own allowance. My own accounts. Money that I control, not you." "Done." "I want the freedom to come and go as I please, to visit whom I choose, to have a life outside the walls of your estate." "Agreed." "And I want—" She hesitated. This one was harder. This one mattered. "I want to be treated with respect, not as an ornament, not as a convenience. If we're to be partners in this arrangement, I want to be seen." Sebastian was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice had lost its edge. "I'll do more than see you, Miss Wentworth. I'll protect you. Whatever else this marriage may lack, you will always have that." It wasn't love. It wasn't even close. But standing in her family's drawing room, with her entire life stretched out before her like an unwritten page, Cecilia realized it might be enough. The wedding took place on a Tuesday. No flowers, no music, no guests except the required witnesses and Cecilia's parents, who watched the proceedings with expressions of thinly veiled bewilderment. The Duke of Blackmore married his bride in a private chapel, slipped a cold gold band onto her finger, and kissed her forehead, not her lips, with the detachment of a man signing a contract, which, Cecilia reminded herself, was exactly what this was. Blackmore House loomed against the London sky like a fortress, all dark stone and iron gates and windows that seemed to watch her approach. The servants lined up in the entrance hall, their faces carefully blank, and Cecilia understood immediately that she was being assessed, judged, found wanting. "The household is yours to manage as you see fit," Sebastian said, already striding toward his study. "Mrs. Thornton is the housekeeper. She'll answer any questions. Dinner is at 8. I prefer to eat alone, but you may join me if you wish." Then he was gone, and Cecilia stood in the cavernous foyer of her new home, surrounded by strangers and silence, and the growing suspicion that she had made a terrible mistake. The days that followed were a study in isolation. Sebastian disappeared into his study for hours, emerged for meals that passed in near total silence, and retired to his chambers in the East Wing, while Cecilia occupied rooms in the West. They were polite to each other, cordial even, two ships passing in an ocean of marble floors and empty hallways, careful never to touch. But Cecilia was nothing if not observant, and she began to notice things. The way Sebastian flinched when anyone mentioned the past, the locked door at the end of the east corridor that no servant would discuss. The nightmares. She heard them through the walls some nights, muffled shouts and the crash of breaking glass, followed by hours of pacing footsteps that didn't stop until dawn. Most tellingly, the way the servants looked at him, not with fear as she might have expected, but with something closer to grief, as though they were watching a man slowly disappear. On the 12th night of her marriage, Cecilia made a decision. She waited until dinner was finished, until Sebastian had retreated to his study with his customary glass of whiskey, and then she followed him. He looked up when she entered, surprise flickering across his features. "Cecilia, is something wrong? I'd like to know about Helena." The name hit like a physical blow. Sebastian's hand tightened around his glass. "No, you said she died. You said you killed her. If I'm to live in this house, you're to live in this house," he cut her off, rising from his chair with barely contained violence. "Because I pay for it, because I chose you, because you agreed to a marriage that required nothing of me but my name and my money. Helena is not part of that bargain." His voice cracked on the name. His eyes were wild, wounded, and Cecilia realized with sudden clarity that the Duke of Blackmore was not cold. He was frozen, a man so full of grief that he had turned himself to ice just to survive it. "I'm not asking to be cruel," she said quietly. "Then don't ask at all." He was shaking. This terrifying, powerful man was shaking like a leaf in a storm, and Cecilia understood, with the bone-deep instinct of someone who had spent years studying the people around her, that pushing him now would break something that couldn't be repaired. "Very well." She rose. "Good night, Sebastian." She was at the door when his voice stopped her. "She died," he said, the words dragged from somewhere deep and dark. "And I killed her. That's all you need to know." Cecilia left without looking back, but she didn't stop wondering. The weeks that followed were an education in loneliness. Cecilia had expected coldness. Sebastian had promised her nothing else, but she hadn't anticipated how much it would hurt. Every silent meal, every night spent alone in her cavernous chambers, every morning waking to the knowledge that her husband existed somewhere in this house, but wanted nothing to do with her. She threw herself into the management of the household, finding small satisfactions in restored order and improved efficiency. Mrs. Thornton, initially suspicious, began to thaw as she recognized Cecilia's competence. The cook complimented her menu suggestions. The gardener listened to her ideas about the neglected rose beds, small victories. But at night, lying alone in her vast bed, Cecilia wondered if this was all her life would ever be. Useful, competent, invisible in a different way. One evening, wandering through a gallery she hadn't yet explored, she stumbled upon something unexpected. A portrait of Sebastian as a young man, perhaps 20, perhaps younger, standing beside a woman who could only be his mother. The resemblance was striking, but what caught Cecilia's breath was his expression. He was smiling, a real smile, unguarded and full of light. She studied that portrait for a long time, trying to reconcile it with the frozen man who shared her breakfast table in silence. He was different then. Cecilia spun. An elderly servant stood in the doorway, one she hadn't met before, with kind eyes and a weathered face. "Forgive me, Your Grace. I'm Thomas. I was the Duke's tutor once. Now I manage the library." "You knew him as a child?" "I knew him as many things. A boy with too many questions, a young man with too much heart. And then, Thomas's expression grew shadowed. And then life taught him that hearts are dangerous things to have. Helena, not only her, though she was the worst of it. Thomas moved to stand beside her, both of them gazing at the portrait. He loved his mother fiercely. She died when he was 16. His father was a cold man, made the current duke look warm by comparison. And then Helena? He shook his head. Some people collect wounds the way others collect treasures. His Grace has more than his share. Why are you telling me this? Thomas looked at her with those kind, knowing eyes. Because you're the first person he's brought into this house since her death. Because you have the look of someone who knows what it means to be invisible. And because, forgive an old man's presumption, I believe you might be the one person capable of reaching him. He left before Cecilia could respond. She stood in the gallery until the candles burned low, staring at the portrait of a boy who had once known how to smile, and wondering if that boy still existed somewhere beneath all those layers of ice. The first ball of the season arrived like a reckoning. Cecilia stood before her mirror, dressed in silk the color of midnight, and barely recognized the woman staring back at her, the Duchess of Blackmore. It sounded like a character from a novel, not a frightened girl who still didn't understand the man she'd married. Sebastian appeared in her doorway, immaculate in black evening clothes, and stopped short. You look... He didn't finish the sentence. His eyes traveled over her slowly. The fitted bodice, the sweep of her bare shoulders, the diamonds at her throat that had arrived that morning without explanation. Appropriate. How romantic. I wasn't attempting romance. No, Cecilia agreed. You never are. Something sparked between them. Irritation, or something more dangerous. Sebastian looked away first. The carriage is waiting. We should go. The ball was everything Cecilia remembered, and nothing like she expected. The same glittering crowds, the same champagne, the same whispered gossip behind fluttering fans, but now the whispers were about her. The looks followed her. The names people called her had changed, from poor Cecilia to the Blackmore Duchess to the woman who somehow trapped the most elusive bachelor in England. She felt it all pressing against her skin, suffocating and exhilarating in equal measure. Duchess. The voice was honey laced with arsenic. Cecilia turned to find a woman approaching, beautiful, blonde, dressed in crimson silk that clung to every curve. Her smile was sharp enough to draw blood. I don't believe we've been introduced. Lady Vivian Blackwood. The name triggered a memory. Whispers at previous balls. A widow. A scandal. An ongoing relationship with a certain reclusive duke that was the worst-kept secret in London. Lady Blackwood. Cecilia's voice was steady. How kind of you to introduce yourself. I simply had to meet the woman who finally caught Sebastian. Vivian's eyes raked over her with barely concealed contempt. We were all so surprised by the announcement. Sebastian always had such specific tastes. Did he? Oh, yes. Beautiful, accomplished, spirited. Each word was a dagger. But then, I suppose men change. Perhaps he was simply tired of passion and wanted something more restful. Cecilia smiled. Perhaps he simply wanted someone who didn't bore him. Vivian's expression flickered. You have claws. How unexpected. I have many unexpected qualities, Lady Blackwood. I'm sure you'll discover them eventually. She walked away before Vivian could respond, her heart pounding and her hands trembling. The encounter had lasted less than 2 minutes, but she felt as though she'd run a marathon. She found Sebastian on the terrace, the same terrace, she realized with a jolt, where he had proposed. He was staring at the night sky with an expression she couldn't read. I met Lady Blackwood, she said. He didn't turn. I saw. She's charming. She's a viper. That's not a denial. Now he turned. His eyes were dark, unreadable. Of what? That I knew her? That we had a past? You knew what you were marrying, Cecilia. You agreed to terms. I did. She stepped closer. But I didn't agree to be humiliated in public by your former mistress. I don't owe you explanations. No, you don't. She held his gaze. But you do owe me the courtesy of not making me look like a fool. Silence. The music from the ballroom drifted between them, waltz tempo and mocking. Vivienne means nothing, Sebastian said finally. Whatever we were ended years ago. She's bitter and she's petty, and she will try to hurt you because she cannot hurt me. And if she succeeds? Sebastian moved toward her, close enough that she could feel the heat of his body through the cold night air. She won't. Because I won't let her. It wasn't a declaration, it wasn't love. But when Cecilia returned to the ballroom on her husband's arm, she felt something she hadn't expected. Protected. And somewhere beneath the protection, buried so deep she almost didn't recognize it. Something else was growing, something dangerous, something that felt terrifyingly like hope. The days after the ball were different. Cecilia found herself replaying that moment on the terrace, the heat of Sebastian's presence, the strange electricity between them. He had defended her, not with grand gestures, but with quiet certainty. I won't let her. She began to study him more carefully, the way he took his coffee, black, no sugar, always from the same cup. The books he read, philosophy, poetry, nothing light or frivolous. The hours he spent in his study, poring over correspondence that had nothing to do with social obligations. You're watching me. Cecilia nearly dropped her embroidery. Sebastian stood in the doorway of the morning room, his expression unreadable. I was merely... Don't. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. You've been observing me for days. I want to know why. Because you're a puzzle I can't solve. Because you married me for reasons I don't understand. Because somewhere beneath all that ice, there's a man who rescues wounded birds and funds orphanages and looks at me sometimes like he's drowning. Curiosity, she said instead. You're my husband. It seems reasonable to want to understand you. Understanding me isn't part of our arrangement. Perhaps I'd like to renegotiate. The words hung between them. Dangerous. Unexpected. Sebastian's jaw tightened. You don't know what you're asking. Then tell me. For a long moment he simply looked at her. Cecilia felt his gaze like a physical weight, searching for something. Truth, perhaps, or the courage to trust. I hurt people, he said finally. Not on purpose, but everyone who gets close to me ends up broken. My mother, Helena. Anyone foolish enough to care. I'm not afraid of being hurt. You should be. He left without another word. But something had shifted. A crack in the fortress. A glimpse of the vulnerability beneath. And Cecilia, who had spent her whole life being overlooked, found herself more determined than ever to be seen. 2 months into her marriage, Cecilia discovered that her husband was lying to her. Not about the past, that remained locked behind his frozen silences and midnight pacing, but about who he was. It started with a letter she found in his study, accidentally, she told herself, though she had taken to wandering into rooms where she didn't belong, searching for pieces of the puzzle that was Sebastian Ashford. The letter was from a solicitor, and it detailed the funding of a school for orphaned girls in Cheapside. The amount was staggering. The donor was anonymous. But the handwriting on the attached note, a careful instruction about curriculum and proper heating for the dormitories, was unmistakably Sebastian's. She found more. A hospital for wounded soldiers, a home for women fleeing violent husbands, a network of charitable work spanning half of London, all funded by a man who supposedly cared about nothing and no one. You were in my study. Cecilia looked up from the letter. Sebastian stood in the doorway, his face carved from stone. You fund orphanages, she said. Schools, hospitals. You've spent a fortune on people who will never know your name. Put that down. Why didn't you tell me? Because it's none of your concern. You made me believe you were cold. She rose, the letter clutched in her hand. You made me believe you were heartless, but you're not, are you? You just want everyone to think you are. Sebastian crossed the room in 3 strides and snatched the letter from her grasp. What I want, he said, his voice low and dangerous, is for you to mind your own affairs. You are my affair. We're married, Sebastian. Whatever you believe about what that means, it makes your secrets my concern. No. He stepped back, putting distance between them. You have no idea what my secrets would cost you. Then tell me. I can't. Can't? Or won't? He was silent so long that Cecilia thought he wouldn't answer. When he did, his voice was barely a whisper. I am not a good man, Cecilia. The things I've done, the things I carry, they would destroy any warmth you're foolish enough to feel for me. I made you a promise. Protection, provision, freedom. I did not promise you truth. I am not capable of giving it. She should have been angry. She should have demanded answers, pressed forward, refused to accept his deflection. Instead, she saw the desperation in his eyes, the plea buried beneath the command. Very well, she said quietly. Keep your secrets, but know this, I see you now, the real you. And I'm not afraid. He flinched as though she'd struck him. She left him standing alone in his study, surrounded by evidence of a kindness he couldn't admit to, and wondered when exactly she had started falling for a man she barely knew. That night, she woke to screaming, her own tears, the nightmares that had plagued her since childhood returning with renewed vengeance. She was worthless, unlovable, invisible. Her mother's voice echoed through the darkness. repeating every cruel truth Cecilia had buried beneath years of careful numbness. She didn't hear her door open, didn't know Sebastian was there, until she felt the mattress dip beside her. "Cecilia," his voice, rough with something that might have been fear. "Cecilia, wake up," she gasped back to consciousness, her face wet with tears, her heart racing. Sebastian sat on the edge of her bed in his shirt-sleeves, his hair disheveled, his expression stripped of every mask. "I'm fine," she managed. "It was just a dream." "You were screaming." "I said I'm fine. You're crying." She was. God help her. She was crying in front of this man who wanted nothing from her but distance, and she couldn't stop. The years of invisibility, the casual cruelties, the endless loneliness, all of it came flooding out in great gasping sobs that shook her entire body. Sebastian didn't speak. He didn't offer platitudes or empty comfort. He simply moved closer, leaned against the headboard beside her, and stayed. She didn't know how long they sat there, minutes, hours, the entire night. She cried until she had nothing left, until her throat was raw and her eyes burned and her body felt hollowed out. Sebastian remained beside her through all of it, a silent presence in the darkness. When dawn began to pale the windows, he finally rose. "I'll have Mrs. Thornton bring you tea," he said. His voice was hoarse. "Rest today, cancel any engagements." "Sebastian, we don't need to speak of this." He was at the door when she found her voice. "Thank you for staying." He paused, didn't turn. "You're my wife," he said simply. "Whatever that means or doesn't mean, you are not alone anymore, Cecilia. Not ever again." Then he was gone, and Cecilia lay in her rumpled bed with the first light of morning streaming through the curtains, and understood that something had changed between them. She didn't see him at breakfast. Mrs. Thornton said he had gone riding at dawn, something he did apparently when he couldn't sleep. Cecilia moved through the day in a strange daze, unable to shake the memory of his presence beside her in the darkness, the warmth of him, the unexpected comfort. That evening she found a small package outside her door. Inside was a book, a collection of poetry by Elizabeth Barrett Browning, with a single note in Sebastian's precise hand. "I thought you might enjoy this. S." No explanation, no context, just a gift, chosen with surprising care, left without fanfare. Cecilia held the book against her chest and felt something unfamiliar rising in her throat. Not tears, not quite, something softer, something that might, in a different light, be called hope. She was reading in the library when Sebastian found her later that night. He hesitated in the doorway, as though uncertain of his welcome. "You found it?" "Yes." She held up the book. "Thank you. It's beautiful. Helena used to read it." The admission seemed to cost him something. "I saw you admiring the garden this afternoon. I think she would have liked you." It was the most he had ever shared voluntarily. Cecilia treaded carefully. "I wish I could have known her." "No." His voice was quiet but certain. "You wouldn't have wanted to know her at the end. The illness, it changed her, made her someone else." He moved to the window, staring out at the dark garden. "Sometimes I wonder if the woman I married was ever real, or if I only loved a version of her that she couldn't sustain. Maybe both things can be true." He turned to look at her. "What do you mean?" "Maybe she was real in the moments when you loved her, and real in the moments when she was ill, and real in every version she ever was. People aren't simple, Sebastian. We contain multitudes. Loving someone means loving all of them, even the parts that frighten us." He was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. "You're wiser than I gave you credit for. I've had a lot of time to think. Being invisible does that." Something flickered in his eyes. Pain, recognition, an apology he didn't know how to voice. "You're not invisible to me," he said. "Not anymore." The words settled between them like a promise. Not love, not yet, but something more dangerous, something that felt terrifyingly like a beginning. The east wing called to her like a whispered secret. Sebastian had left for business in the city, wouldn't return until evening, and Cecilia found her feet carrying her down the forbidden corridor before she could talk herself out of it. She told herself it was curiosity, investigation, the reasonable desire to understand the man she had married. She knew it was something more dangerous than that. The locked door yielded to a key she'd found in Sebastian's desk. Another invasion, another betrayal, another step deeper into territory she had no right to explore. But she was past caring about rights. She needed to know. The room beyond was a tomb. Not literally. No coffin, no body, no physical remnant of death, but the air itself felt embalmed, preserved, Frozen in a moment 3 years past. White sheets covered the furniture. Dust motes hung suspended in the weak light, filtering through heavy curtains, and everywhere, the presence of a woman who was no longer there. Helena. Her portrait hung above the fireplace, a delicate blonde beauty with enormous eyes and a smile that seemed, even in paint, to tremble on the edge of breaking. She looked fragile, ethereal, like something that might shatter at a touch. Cecilia moved through the room slowly, reverently, touching nothing but seeing everything. A vanity table with silver brushes, a wardrobe full of gowns that would never be worn again, a writing desk with a diary. She shouldn't read it. She knew she shouldn't. This was beyond curiosity, beyond investigation, into something that felt like violation, but her hands were already reaching, already opening, already turning to the final entries. The handwriting was erratic, the ink smudged in places by tears. He tries so hard. He loves me so much. But love is not enough, is it? Love cannot stop the darkness from coming. Love cannot keep me from the edge. The doctor says it's hysteria. Mother says it's weakness. Sebastian says nothing at all anymore. He just watches me with those desperate eyes. And I know he's waiting for me to shatter. Sometimes I think it would be kinder to shatter all at once than to crack a little more each day. There is a peace in falling. I've thought about it often. The cliff at Blackmore Abbey, how the wind sounds there like the whole world singing, how the rocks below would welcome me, how Sebastian would finally be free. The entries ended there. Cecilia closed the diary with shaking hands. She died. I killed her. Not murder. Nothing so simple as that. Sebastian hadn't pushed his wife from a cliff or poisoned her tea or committed any of the gothic horrors the gossips invented. He had loved her desperately, devotedly, with everything he had, and it hadn't been enough. Helena had jumped, and Sebastian had been left behind to carry the weight of a grief that was not his fault, but would always feel like his failure. You shouldn't be here. Cecilia spun. Sebastian stood in the doorway, still wearing his traveling coat, his face a mask of devastation. Sebastian, did you find what you were looking for? His voice was ice. No, not ice. Broken glass. Something shattered and sharp that cut him as much as her. Did you read her words? Did you see how she suffered? Are you satisfied now? I'm sorry. Sorry. He laughed. A terrible sound. More sob than mirth. Everyone is always sorry. The doctors were sorry. Her family was sorry. God knows I was sorry. But sorry doesn't bring back the dead, does it? Sorry doesn't undo the moment I found her body at the bottom of those cliffs. Sorry doesn't erase the hours I spent carrying her in my arms, screaming at a God who wasn't listening. He was shaking. Tears were streaming down his face, and Cecilia realized with shock that this was the first time she had ever seen him cry. You didn't kill her, she said. I should have saved her. You couldn't. I should have. The words tore from him. She was my wife, my responsibility. I saw the darkness taking her, and I believed that if I just loved her enough, it would be enough. But it wasn't. I wasn't. And now she's dead, and I have to live with that every single day. Cecilia crossed the room. She took his face in her hands, something she had never done, something that violated every rule of their arrangement, and forced him to look at her. Listen to me, she said. Her illness was not your fault. Her death was not your fault. You loved her the best way you knew how, and it wasn't enough because nothing could have been enough. That's not failure. That's tragedy. And there's a difference. You don't understand. I understand that you've been punishing yourself for 3 years. I understand that you married me because you thought you didn't deserve to be loved again. I understand that you are so afraid of feeling anything that you've turned yourself into a ghost. Her voice broke. And I understand that I cannot watch you disappear anymore. Sebastian stared at her. Something was cracking behind his eyes, ice finally giving way to water, walls finally crumbling. You should hate me, he whispered. I don't. You should run. I won't. Cecilia, you don't have to love me. You never have to love me if you can't. But please, her own tears were falling now, and she didn't try to stop them. Please let me help you live again. He broke. Not with violence, not with rage, with a sound that was somehow worse. A single sob wrenched from somewhere deep and wounded, followed by a collapse that brought him to his knees on the floor of his dead wife's room. Cecilia went down with him, held him as he wept, stroked his hair and whispered words that didn't matter because nothing mattered except this. He was finally feeling again. They stayed there until the light faded, until the room grew cold, until Sebastian's tears were spent and his breathing steadied. I don't know how to let her go, he said finally. You don't have to let her go. Cecilia touched his face. You just have to let yourself live. She would have wanted that. He looked at her, really looked, and for the first time since their wedding, she saw something in his eyes that wasn't grief. It looked like hope. The next morning, Sebastian did something unexpected. He knocked on her door, actually knocked instead of summoning her through servants, and asked if she would walk with him in the garden. The spring air was soft, fragrant with early blooms, and Sebastian moved through the paths with the careful steps of a man rediscovering familiar ground. He pointed out plants that Helena had chosen, statues she had positioned, a bench where she used to sit and read. You don't have to do this, Cecilia said gently. I know. He stopped beside a rose bush, its buds still tightly furled. But I want to. She was part of my life. I don't want to pretend she wasn't. That's healthy. He laughed, actually laughed. A sound so unexpected that Cecilia felt her heart stutter. God help us, we're trying to be healthy. He shook his head. A month ago, I would have locked myself in my study and refused to speak for days. Now I'm walking through gardens and talking about feelings. You're a dangerous influence, Cecilia. I prefer to think of myself as therapeutic. Same thing. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, circling the fountain, passing through the hedge maze. When they emerged on the other side, Sebastian's hand found hers. The touch was tentative, questioning, as though he wasn't sure he had the right. Cecilia laced her fingers through his. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. Be together, with someone, after everything. We'll figure it out. And if I fail, if I retreat into the cold again, then I'll drag you back out. She squeezed his hand. I'm very persistent. Ask anyone. He lifted their joined hands and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. The gesture was courtly, almost formal, but the look in his eyes was anything but. Thank you, he said quietly, for not giving up on me. I considered it, she admitted, several times. Usually when you were being particularly insufferable. I'm frequently insufferable. I've noticed. They smiled at each other, really smiled, and Cecilia felt something shift in her chest. Not the desperate hope she'd been carrying, but something calmer, something that might, given time and care, grow into certainty. The days after the revelation were tender. Sebastian didn't become a different person. The damage ran too deep for miracles, but something had shifted. He emerged from his study earlier. He joined her for breakfast. He walked with her in the garden, silent but present, as though learning how to inhabit his own life again. And he began, slowly, to touch her. Nothing scandalous, nothing that violated their arrangement, but a hand at her elbow as they entered a room, a brush of fingers when he passed her a book, the careful, hesitant gestures of a man remembering what it felt like to be human. Cecilia told herself it was enough, told herself she didn't want more, told herself that the flutter in her chest when he looked at her meant nothing. She was lying. The realization came at unexpected moments, watching him laugh at something she said, feeling his gaze follow her across a room, waking from dreams that left her breathless and aching. She was falling in love with her husband, the husband who had married her specifically because she didn't love him, the husband who had buried his heart with his first wife and sworn never to exhume it. The irony was not lost on her. You're different lately, Sebastian observed one evening. They were in the library, the fire crackling, both pretending to read. Am I? Quieter, more distant. His eyes narrowed. Are you regretting this? Our arrangement? Yes. No. I'm regretting that I'm not strong enough to keep my heart out of this. I'm fine, she said. You're lying. And you're remarkably perceptive for a man who spent 3 years ignoring everything except his own guilt. The words came out sharper than she intended. Sebastian flinched. Cecilia, I'm tired. She rose, setting down her unread book. I think I'll retire early. She was halfway to the door when his voice stopped her. I'm trying. She paused but didn't turn. I know I'm not. I know this isn't what you hoped for when you said yes on that terrace, but I'm trying. To be better. To be present. I don't know if it's enough, but I need you to know that I'm trying. She turned. He was standing now, the firelight casting shadows across his face, and he looked more vulnerable than she had ever seen him. It's enough, she said softly. It's more than enough, for now. But she was terrified of what would happen when it stopped being enough, when her heart demanded more than he could give. She left before he could see her tears. The invitation to Blackmore Abbey arrived on a grey Tuesday. Sebastian had inherited the coastal estate years ago, but he had never returned since Helena's death. The cliffs, the sea, the place where everything had ended. We should go, Cecilia said. Sebastian looked at her as though she'd suggested they set themselves on fire. No, you're still running from it, from her, from what happened. And you think confronting it will help. I think hiding from it is killing you. The argument lasted 3 days. Cecilia pushed, Sebastian retreated. She presented logic, he countered with ice. It was exhausting, infuriating, and utterly necessary, because somewhere during the battle, Cecilia realized she wasn't fighting for his healing anymore. She was fighting for them. In the end, Sebastian agreed. Not gracefully, he was silent for the entire journey, his jaw clenched, his eyes fixed on nothing, but he agreed. And when the carriage crested the final hill and Blackmore Abbey appeared against the storm-dark sky, Cecilia felt something shift in the air around them. The estate was beautiful and terrible. Ancient stone walls, wild gardens gone to seed, and the cliffs. God, the cliffs. They fell away to the churning sea like the edge of the world, and Cecilia understood immediately why Helena had been drawn to them. There was something hypnotic about the drop, something that promised peace, something that made her reach for Sebastian's hand. He flinched at her touch but didn't pull away. "I can't," he said. "You can. You don't understand. Then help me understand." She stepped in front of him, blocking his view of the cliffs. "Tell me what you see when you look at this place." His face contorted. "I see her, every time I close my eyes, standing at the edge, turning to look at me, smiling. God help me," she smiled, before she stepped into nothing. "I wasn't fast enough. I wasn't close enough. I wasn't—" "Sebastian, I can still hear the sound when she hit—" "Sebastian." Cecilia took his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. "She's gone, and nothing you do, no amount of punishment, no amount of hiding, will bring her back. But you're still here. You're still alive. Doesn't that count for something? I don't know how to live without the guilt. Then let me teach you." The storm broke that night, real and metaphorical. Rain lashed the windows, lightning split the sky, and Cecilia woke to find Sebastian's bed empty, his boots gone, the door to the grounds standing open. She found him on the cliffs. He stood at the very edge, exactly where Helena must have stood, rain streaming down his face and his coat whipping in the wind. For one terrible moment Cecilia's heart stopped, but then she saw his posture. Not despair, not surrender, confrontation. "Sebastian!" She had to shout over the storm. "Come back, please." He didn't move. "I come here in my dreams, every night, trying to reach her, trying to stop her, but I never can." "You couldn't have stopped her." She was closer now, close enough to touch him, but she didn't, not yet. "Her death was not your choice. It was hers. I should have—" "What, locked her away, watched her every moment? She was ill, Sebastian, desperately, tragically ill, and she chose to end her suffering the only way she knew how. You can grieve that, you can rage against it, but you cannot take responsibility for a choice that was never yours to make." He turned to face her, and the raw anguish in his eyes took her breath away. "How do I let her go?" "You don't." Cecilia stepped closer, rain soaking through her nightgown, her whole body shaking with cold and emotion. "You carry her with you, you honor her memory, but you stop using her death as a reason to punish yourself for being alive." "Cecilia, I love you." The words escaped before she could stop them, 3 syllables that changed everything, that violated every rule, that left her standing naked in the storm, with nothing to protect her. Sebastian stared at her. "What?" "I love you. I didn't mean to. I tried not to, but I do, and I can't watch you destroy yourself anymore. Not without telling you that someone in this world wants you to live, needs you to live. You can't. We agreed." "Damn what we agreed." She was crying now, or maybe it was just the rain. "I'm not asking you to love me back. I'm asking you to let go of the cliff. I'm asking you to come home." The silence stretched between them, filled with thunder and crashing waves and the weight of everything unspoken. Sebastian's face was impossible to read, or maybe she was just too afraid to look. Then he moved, not away, toward. His arms wrapped around her with desperate strength, pulling her against his chest, his face buried in her rain-soaked hair. "I thought I was dead," he whispered. "I thought she took the last living part of me when she fell. But then you— God, Cecilia, you walked into that ballroom and looked at me like I was just a man. Not a monster, not a ghost, just a man. You are just a man." "I'm trying to be." He pulled back enough to see her face, and what she saw in his eyes stopped her heart. "I don't know how to love you the way you deserve," he said. "I don't know if I'll ever be whole enough for that, but I know that when I think about living, actually living, not just surviving, you're the only thing that makes it seem possible." "Sebastian," He kissed her. Not a gentle kiss, not a careful kiss, a kiss that tasted of rain and desperation and 3 years of grief finally finding release. He kissed her like she was the first breath after drowning, the first light after darkness, the first hope after despair. And standing on the edge of the cliff where his first wife had died, Cecilia kissed him back. The rain soaked through them both, plastering her nightgown to her skin, turning his shirt transparent against the muscles of his chest. But neither of them moved to seek shelter. This moment, this impossible, devastating moment, was worth any cold. When they finally broke apart, Sebastian pressed his forehead to hers. "I've been so afraid," he whispered, "of feeling anything, of wanting anything, because the last time I wanted something this much, I lost it. I'm not going anywhere. You don't know that. You can't promise. I can promise to try. I can promise to fight for this, for us, every single day. I can promise that whatever happens, I won't leave you to face it alone." He pulled her closer, his arms tight around her as though she might disappear if he loosened his grip. "I don't deserve you. Probably not." She pulled back to look at him, rainwater streaming down both their faces like tears. "But you have me anyway. So what are you going to do about it?" The laugh that escaped him was raw, broken, beautiful. "Love you, apparently. Against all odds and better judgment. That's all I ask." They stayed on the cliffs until the storm began to gentle, until the first grey light of dawn crept over the horizon, until they were both shivering so hard they could barely stand. Then Sebastian swept her into his arms, literally swept her, like something from the novels she had never dared to believe in, and carried her back to the house. The days that followed were a revelation. Sebastian touched her constantly now, small touches, seeking touches, as though he couldn't quite believe she was real. They talked for hours, sharing stories they had never told anyone. Cecilia learned about his childhood, his mother's death, the years of loneliness that had preceded Helena, and slowly, tentatively, he began to learn about her. "Your mother," he said one evening, as they sat before the fire in the library. "She never appreciated you. She never saw me." Cecilia shrugged, though the old wound still ached. "I was the plain one, the practical one, the daughter you kept to run your household, not the one you displayed at balls. She was a fool. She was a product of her world. Women like her only understand one kind of value: beauty, marriageability, social currency. I had none of those things. You have something better." Sebastian's voice was fierce. "You have strength, intelligence, the kind of quiet courage that most people never develop because they've never had to. Is that why you chose me? Because I was strong?" He considered the question seriously. "I chose you because you looked at me without expectations. Everyone else wanted something. My title, my fortune, my redemption. You just wanted to be left alone. There was something honest in that. And now? Now I can't imagine wanting anyone else." The kiss that followed was different from the ones before, softer, deeper, filled with the promise of things to come. They returned to London as different people. Something had broken open on those cliffs, and what grew in its place was fragile but real. A love built not on illusion but on truth, on shared wounds, on the terrifying decision to be vulnerable with someone who could hurt you. But happiness, Cecilia was learning, made you a target. Lady Vivian struck first. The rumors started as whispers, that Cecilia had trapped the Duke through manipulation, that she possessed damaging secrets about Helena's death, that the marriage was a sham designed to access Sebastian's fortune. They grew louder with each passing day, fed by Vivian's poisonous tongue and the Tun's endless appetite for scandal. "Ignore her," Sebastian said, but Cecilia couldn't ignore the cancelled invitations, the cold shoulders at events, the way former acquaintances suddenly forgot her name. She was being erased, not through invisibility this time, but through active destruction. "She's going to ruin me," Cecilia said one night, after another humiliating dinner party, where she'd been treated like a disease. "And when she does, she'll ruin you too. Let her try." "Sebastian, I spent 3 years caring what society thought of me. 3 years letting their whispers dictate my life." He took her hands. "I refuse to do it again, especially now, especially with you." But the attack was coming, and they both knew it. Vivian had been gathering ammunition for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And the perfect moment arrived at the Duke of Wellington's ball, the final event of the season, where all of London would be watching. Cecilia dressed carefully that night. Her armor was green silk, fitted perfectly, accessorized with the Blackmore emeralds that had been in Sebastian's family for generations. She looked like a duchess. She felt like a woman walking to her own execution. "Stay close to me," Sebastian murmured as they entered the ballroom. "Always." Vivian found them within minutes. She swept across the floor like a crimson tide, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Your Graces," she purred, "how wonderful that you could join us. I was just telling Lady Melbourne about the fascinating correspondence I've acquired. Letters, you see, from the late Duchess to her doctor. So illuminating about her final days." Cecilia's blood ran cold. Sebastian's hand tightened on her arm. "What are you playing at, Vivian?" he asked quietly. "Playing? Nothing at all. I simply thought society should know the truth about your current arrangement." She raised her voice, drawing attention from nearby guests. "After all, it's quite remarkable. A man whose first wife died under mysterious circumstances, suddenly married to a woman no one had ever noticed before. One might wonder what secrets she used to— Enough!" Sebastian's voice cut through the ballroom like a blade. The music stuttered. Conversations died. Every eye turned to them. "You want to discuss secrets, Vivian? Let's discuss them." He stepped forward, releasing Cecilia's arm. "My first wife suffered from a disease of the mind. She took her own life. I spent 3 years blaming myself for her death, hiding from the world, punishing myself for a tragedy I could not prevent. That is the truth, the entire truth, and I will not allow you or anyone to use it as a weapon against my wife." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Vivian's face went pale. "Sebastian," she started. "I'm not finished." He turned, addressing the entire ballroom now. "You want to know why I married Cecilia Wentworth? Because she saw me. Not my title, not my fortune, not the rumors. She saw a broken man and chose to help him heal. She taught me that surviving is not the same as living. She gave me a reason to face my past instead of running from it." He turned back to Cecilia, and his eyes were bright with an emotion she had never expected to see there. "I married her because I needed someone who wouldn't love me. Instead, I found someone I couldn't help but love myself." The silence was absolute. Then Sebastian went to his knees, just as he had on the terrace all those months ago, just as he had when this impossible arrangement began, and took Cecilia's hands. "I made you a proposal once," he said. "It was selfish and cold and beneath both of us, so I'm making another one now. Marry me again, Cecilia, not because of a contract, not because of convenience. Marry me because I love you, because I want to spend whatever life I have left proving that you were the best decision I ever made." Cecilia was crying. She didn't care. "Yes," she whispered. Then louder, "Yes, 1,000 times, yes." The applause started slowly and built to a roar. Vivian disappeared into the crowd, defeated, and Sebastian rose, pulled Cecilia into his arms, and kissed her in front of all of London. Let them talk, Cecilia thought. Let them whisper and gossip and speculate. She had spent 27 years being invisible. Tonight, she was finally seen. 1 year later, spring came to Blackmore Abbey like a promise kept. Cecilia walked through gardens that she had spent months coaxing back to life. Roses and lavender, climbing jasmine and wild honeysuckle. The cliffs still fell away to the sea, but they no longer looked like an ending. They looked like the beginning of something infinite. Sebastian watched her from the terrace, a smile playing at his lips, a real smile, one that reached his eyes, that transformed his face from beautiful to breathtaking. He smiled often now. He laughed. He held her hand in public and kissed her in private, and occasionally, when no one was watching, danced with her in the empty ballroom just because he could. He was not healed. Healing, Cecilia had learned, was not a destination, but a journey. There were still difficult nights, still moments when the grief rose up and threatened to drown him, but he faced them now, with her, always with her, and each time they emerged a little stronger. "You're staring," she called up to him. "I'm admiring. There's a difference." She laughed and made her way up the garden path toward the terrace. He met her at the top, wrapping his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "The roses are coming in beautifully," he said. "Helena would have loved them." He stiffened slightly, old instinct, then relaxed. They spoke of Helena now, openly and without pain. She was part of their story, part of what had brought them together, and Cecilia refused to let her become a ghost. "She would have," Sebastian agreed quietly. "Thank you for letting her be part of this." Cecilia turned in his arms to face him. "She was your wife. She's part of who you are. That doesn't threaten me. You're remarkable, I know." He laughed and kissed her, soft and slow, the way he had learned to kiss her over the past year, with patience, with tenderness, with the quiet confidence of a man who knew he had all the time in the world. When they finally broke apart, Cecilia took his hand and placed it on her stomach. "Speaking of remarkable," she said. Sebastian went very still. His eyes dropped to her belly, then rose to her face. "Cecilia, apparently, we're going to need another room in the nursery wing." The sound he made was something between a laugh and a sob. He dropped to his knees, always to his knees with this man, and pressed his forehead against her stomach, his shoulders shaking. "Sebastian," she stroked his hair. "Say something." He looked up at her and his face was transformed, open, joyful, terrified in the most beautiful way. "I'm going to be a father. You are. I'm going to have a family. You already do." She cupped his face in her hands. "You have me. You have this child. You have a future, Sebastian, a real one. All you have to do is claim it." He rose and pulled her into his arms, with a fierceness that took her breath away. "I don't deserve this," he whispered. "Yes, you do." She pulled back to meet his eyes. "We both do." They stood there on the terrace as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, and Cecilia thought about the woman she had been a year ago, invisible, forgotten, convinced that love was something that happened to other people. She had been so wrong. "I love you," Sebastian said. 3 words, simple, ordinary, but from his lips, spoken with the weight of everything they had survived, they sounded like poetry. "I love you too," Cecilia replied. Below them, the sea crashed against the cliffs in its eternal rhythm. Behind them, Blackmore Abbey stood not as a monument to grief, but as a home, warm and bright and full of possibility. And ahead of them, stretching out like an unwritten story, lay all the years they would spend together, the joys they would discover, the challenges they would face, the family they would build. It wouldn't always be easy. Cecilia knew that now. Love was not a fairy tale ending, but a daily choice, the choice to see each other, to fight for each other, to stay even when staying was hard. But she had made that choice. So had Sebastian. And standing in his arms as the first stars began to appear, Cecilia Ashford, Duchess of Blackmore, finally understood what it meant to be visible, not because of titles or gowns or society's approval, but because she had found someone who looked at her and saw not what she lacked, but everything she was, and everything they could become together. That night, after the sun had set and the stars had emerged in their infinite multitudes, Sebastian and Cecilia sat on the terrace and watched the moonlight dance across the sea. A fire crackled in the brazier beside them, casting warm shadows across their faces. "I've been thinking about names," Cecilia said, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. "Already? It's never too early to plan." Sebastian's arm tightened around her shoulders. "What names were you considering?" "If it's a girl, Helena." She felt him stiffen, then slowly relax. "You don't have to. I want to. She was part of your life, Sebastian, part of what made you who you are. If our daughter carries her name, it won't be a burden. It will be a bridge, a way of honoring the past while building the future." He was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "And if it's a boy, then you'll choose." She turned to look at him. "I've made so many decisions in this family. This one belongs to you." "Thomas," he said immediately. "After my old tutor, the man who taught me that kindness was not weakness." "Thomas," Cecilia smiled. "I like it. Helena or Thomas. Either way, they'll be loved. More than loved." Sebastian's hand moved to cover hers on her stomach. "They'll be seen. Both of them. All of them. However many we're blessed with. I won't make the mistakes my father made. Our children will know exactly how much they matter. I never doubted that for a moment." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead, listening to the eternal rhythm of the waves against the cliffs. Cecilia thought about her sisters, all 3 of them married to men who had chosen them for beauty, for connections, for the right kind of name. She had pitied them once, or at least envied what she thought they had. Now she understood that she was the lucky one. Her marriage had begun as a transaction, a desperate escape from a life of invisibility. But somewhere along the way, in the silences and the struggles, in the gradual thawing of a frozen heart, it had become something else entirely. A partnership, a refuge, a love story. "What are you thinking about?" Sebastian murmured. "How strange life is. A year ago, I was standing at my sister's wedding, accepting that I would never be loved. And now," she gestured at the moonlit sea, the beautiful house, the man whose arms held her with such tenderness. "Now I have everything I never dared to dream of." "Not everything." Sebastian's voice held a hint of mischief, I haven't taught you to ride properly yet, and your piano playing still leaves much to be desired." Cecilia laughed, a full, bright sound that carried across the cliffs and disappeared into the night. "Then I suppose we'll have to keep working on it. We have time." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "All the time in the world." And they did. The years that followed would bring joy and sorrow, laughter and tears, all the beautiful chaos of a life truly lived. There would be children, 3 eventually, and grandchildren, and a legacy built not on titles or fortunes, but on the simple radical act of seeing each other clearly. But that was all in the future. Tonight there was only this: 2 people who had found each other against impossible odds, sitting on the edge of the world, grateful for every moment they had been given. "I love you," Sebastian said, the words that had once been so impossible for him, now as natural as breathing. "I love you too," Cecilia replied, and the sea kept its ancient rhythm, and the stars wheeled overhead, and 2 hearts that had spent so long in shadow finally stepped into the light. Together, always together.